In the sunlit kitchen, I was preparing my son's lunch box. Early October in Connecticut had already turned chilly. Outside the window, maple leaves were beginning to turn red. In this suburban town, luxury cars would stream toward the city each morning, heading to their offices. "Mom, soccer practice might run late today." Ethan, my freshman in high school, came rushing down the stairs. He'd grown taller recently, now surpassing my shoulder height. In his navy blazer, white shirt, and gray slacks, he looked just like his father in his younger days, the same gentle eyes and calm demeanor. Watching my son excel both in sports and academics, I couldn't help but see shadows of my late husband. "Soccer practice. What time will you be home for dinner?" "Probably after 6. Everyone's working hard for next week's game." Ethan grabbed orange juice from the fridge and drank it in one gulp. His grades were excellent, and he was athletic too. For the past 3 years, we'd managed somehow, just the two of us. Since Tom's sudden passing from a heart attack, every day had been a battle. My job as a real estate broker kept me busy, and an annual income of $85,000 wasn't much in this affluent suburb. Still, considering my son's education, I couldn't afford to give up this job. I smoothed my brown hair and slipped into my modest suit. This was my style. "Ethan, keys." I tossed the car keys, and my son caught them skillfully. It was a 15-minute drive to Greenwich High School. This time was our precious moment for conversation. Caught in morning traffic, I enjoyed our casual chatter. Perhaps this was my happiest time of day. The morning tranquility was broken by a phone call from my mother. "Jennifer, about Vanessa's party tomorrow." Mother Patricia's voice echoed through the receiver. My mother, proud of her social influence, was always preoccupied with my sister Vanessa's affairs. Mother was pretentious and vain, particularly excessive in her doting on my sister. "Yes, of course I'll be there. The venue is La Scale. The dress code is semi-formal, so please wear something appropriate. Not like that plain outfit you wore to last year's Christmas party." Behind Mother's words lurked her usual criticism. She disapproved of my modest appearance. Meanwhile, my sister Vanessa was Mother's ideal. Working as a nurse at Mercy General Hospital, she charmed everyone with her beauty and social grace. Her golden hair and model-like figure were Mother's pride and joy. Since childhood, my sister had been showered with Mother's affection. That evening, after finishing work, I received a call from Vanessa. "Jen. He's absolutely wonderful. Even better than I imagined." My sister's voice bubbled with excitement. Mother had been bragging about her fiancé's credentials and income to anyone who would listen. "He's such a wonderful person, with such potential." Mother took over the phone, boasting. "Nothing like your Tom. Poor Tom. He gave up his future and took a local job for your sake." Those words stung. Mother had never approved of my husband's modest background. That night, after my son had gone to bed, I stood by the living room window, gazing at the night sky. I remembered the day 3 years ago when I lost Tom to a sudden heart attack. Though he didn't have an impressive career, he was a kind, honest man. He still holds a special place in my heart. I know he limited his career to our local area for my sake, as we'd been together since high school. But that was our choice. Tomorrow is my sister's engagement party. I want to celebrate her sincerely. Yet I also felt lonely, being misunderstood within this family. Mother and my sister always looked down on my lifestyle, treating my choices as failures. Still, every time I see my son's sleeping face, I find the courage to move forward. He is my pride and hope. Late at night, in the quiet house, I began preparing for tomorrow's party. As I took out a modest navy dress from the closet, I thought about how tomorrow would bring another new day. I would accept both mother's words and my sister's boasting. That was my role, after all. One afternoon, I was in the middle of showing a property. The autumn sunlight filled the room, highlighting the property's best features. While negotiating prices with my client, my phone rang. It was from an unknown number. "Is this Mrs. Miller? Your son Ethan has been in an accident." In that moment, it felt as if the world had stopped. My ears were ringing, and voices seemed distant. It was a call from Greenwich High School staff. Ethan had been hit by a car that ran a red light while he was crossing at a crosswalk after school. A classmate who witnessed the accident called an ambulance, and teachers rushed to the scene. The emergency team had already arrived and was transporting him to Mercy General Hospital. "How serious is the accident?" As I asked with a trembling voice, the staff member hesitated before answering. "It appears to have been a severe impact. He's conscious, but..." I couldn't wait to hear the rest. After hastily apologizing to my client, I immediately got in my car. Even waiting a few seconds for traffic lights felt like an eternity. The honking of cars, the red autumn leaves on the street trees, everything seemed blurry. All I could think of was my son's smile. His smile this morning when I last saw him. That can't be the last. No, it can't be the last. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Though I'd driven this road countless times, today it felt unusually long. Other cars seemed to move too slowly. Everything was too slow. On the way, I passed the accident scene. A police car was stopped there, with officers gathering evidence. White chalk lines had been drawn on the crosswalk, and textbooks and notebooks were scattered on the ground. I recognized them as Ethan's belongings. His uniform's blue tie fluttered in the wind. Seeing that, a sob escaped my throat. I arrived at the hospital at 2:45 p.m. Running into the emergency entrance, I was enveloped by a breathtaking tension. Doctors in white coats hurried back and forth, nurses carried equipment, and patient names echoed through the air. The smell of disinfectant stung my nose. A child's cry could be heard from somewhere. "The emergency room is down this hallway." I ran following the receptionist's directions. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. My legs were shaking. But I couldn't stop. Reaching the treatment room, I found Ethan surrounded by medical staff. His face was pale, and his uniform was stained with blood. The monitor beeped ominously. An 4 needle was in his arm, and an oxygen mask covered his face. Was this really my son? The same boy I'd cheerfully sent off to school this morning. "There's likely internal organ damage, and the bleeding is serious. CT scans show a liver laceration. We've also confirmed bleeding from the spleen," the young doctor explained in a calm voice. Dressed in clean white coat, he explained the situation with a confident gaze. His voice carried definite assurance. "Immediate surgery is necessary. I will perform the operation. Please. Please save him." My voice was trembling. I clasped my son's hand. It was cold. I'd never felt it so cold before. It was usually warm. "Mom." Ethan called out weakly. His face was contorted with pain. Yet his eyes looked at me with concern. "It's all right. I'm here. I won't leave you. It hurts. I'm scared." Those words tore at my heart. My strong son, to admit such weakness. How much pain must he be in? Nurses kept coming into the treatment room. They checked vital signs, attached new 4 bags, and followed the doctor's instructions. Their efficiency gave me a glimmer of hope. Amidst the preparations for surgery, I needed to call Mother. I knew I couldn't attend tonight's party. I felt I should tell her. But first, I had to sign the consent forms. I received the papers with trembling hands. The letters seemed to blur. "Mom, Ethan's been in an accident. Today is Vanessa's proposal party. Don't ruin it." Mother's voice was filled with anger. In the background, I could hear people talking. The clinking of glasses. Laughter. The party preparations seemed to have already begun. I could hear the busy sounds of the luxury restaurant's kitchen. "But he's seriously injured. I'm at the hospital now. They say he needs surgery." My voice caught. Tears rolled down my cheeks. "I can't believe this. You're always like this." "I'm putting Vanessa on. This is supposed to be my special once-in-a-lifetime day. How could you? Why today of all days?" My sister screamed on the other end. Her voice was mixed with anger and disappointment. She'd always hated when things didn't go her way. But this was different. This was about my son's life. My hands trembled. While my son was hovering between life and death. Their family. Why can't they understand? I wanted to scream inside. But no voice came out. Each time the treatment room door opened, new staff entered. Voices announcing blood test results, voices confirming operating room preparations. Among all this, I listened only to my son's breathing. Then, the operating room door opened. The doctor from earlier appeared. "Mrs. Miller, we're ready for surgery." His gaze held firm resolve. I could sense his professional determination. There was something reassuring about his presence. "I will save him. That is my mission as a doctor." How comforting those words were. Tears welled up. As I watched my son disappear into the operating room, I stood there, almost in prayer. My son, whom I'd sent off to school as usual this morning. Though it was only hours ago, it felt like the distant past. Our conversation at the breakfast table. Our casual chat in the car. Everything had become precious memories. I sat in the waiting room chair, covering my face with my hands. My smartphone kept vibrating. Surely from Mother. But I had no strength to answer. Each notification tone made my heart constrict. The "surgery in progress" sign glowed red. The light seemed the color of blood. The clock hands moved cruelly slow. Outside the window, dusk was approaching. Looking up at the orange-tinted sky, I continued to pray for my son's life to be saved. Prayer was all I could do. This helplessness brought fresh tears. In front of the operating room, I pressed my trembling hands to my chest. The red lamp's light coldly illuminated the hallway. The surgery that would determine my son's fate was about to begin. The clock showed 3 p.m. The second hand on the waiting room wall clock seemed to move unnaturally slowly. There was no one beside me. At this moment, I felt painfully aware of how alone my son and I were. While nurses bustled about, I alone felt trapped in suspended time. Beyond the operating room doors, the battle for my son's life had begun. The sounds of machines, staff voices, and metal instruments clinking faintly reached through the doors. Each sound squeezed my heart. My smartphone vibrated again. The screen showed an incoming call from Mother. Though I had no energy to answer the phone, I checked the message. All the party preparations are complete. Don't ruin everything with your selfishness. Those words suddenly filled me with anger. Selfishness. When my son's life was in danger. But I didn't even have the energy to raise my voice. I just sat in the cold waiting room chair. Outside the window, clouds drifted by. The sky that had been clear this morning now felt eerily distant. I tried flipping through old magazines in the waiting room, but the words wouldn't register. After 4 o'clock, a nurse came to provide an update. Her expression made my spine freeze. There's more bleeding than expected, and additional procedures are needed. However, the surgeon is doing everything possible, so please try not to worry. At those words, my heart nearly stopped. Additional procedures. The weight of those words bore heavily on my shoulders. As I stared at the operating room doors, memories of my son's childhood flooded back. The day he first walked, his first words, his first day of school. Every moment felt as if it had existed for this very time. How much blood loss. His condition. My voice shook. The nurse wore an apologetic expression. The details will be explained by the surgeon after the operation. After that, the waiting room returned to silence. Only occasionally did the sound of medical staff's footsteps echo in the hallway. The sound of 4-pole wheels. Someone's voice. Everything felt distant. Nurses rushing with new 4 bags, medical technicians running with blood test results. Knowing that each person played a vital role in my son's life filled me with both gratitude and anxiety. The clock hands moved mercilessly forward. During this time, Mother's calls exceeded 10. The message content grew increasingly aggressive. I ignored them all. Right now, all I could do was pray. I remembered my son's smile as I sent him off to school this morning. His usual, "I'm off," now felt like a distant memory. Outside the window, dusk was falling, and street lights were turning on one by one. Other families in the waiting room must be carrying similar anxieties. Occasional sounds of crying, deep sighs, words of prayer. How many lives intersected in this hospital? Just past 8 p.m., sudden activity broke out. The operating room doors opened, and medical staff began moving busily. I stood up, watching the scene with bated breath. The exhausted surgeon appeared. His white coat bore vivid traces of the surgery. In his appearance, I saw evidence of the 6-hour battle. His hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, and dark circles of fatigue showed under his eyes. "Mrs. Miller." His voice was slightly hoarse. "The surgery was successful. Your son has pulled through. We've repaired the liver laceration and stopped the bleeding from the spleen. His overall condition is stable." At that moment, my knees gave way. A nurse rushed to support me. Tears flowed uncontrollably. "Thank you, thank you." To my repeated words of gratitude, the doctor smiled quietly. His eyes showed the same relief. "We'll need to monitor his post-operative progress, but he's past the most critical stage. We'll observe him carefully in the ICU for 24 hours. It may take some time before he regains consciousness." "Mrs. Miller." He paused for a moment. The surrounding nurses also changed their expressions, as if noticing something. I apologize. I should have noticed at such a time, but you are. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed from down the hallway. The sound of high heels on the cold floor. Michael. Why aren't you at the party? Turning around, there stood my sister Vanessa. In an elegant dress, her face was flushed red. Behind her, several guests who seemed to have rushed from the party venue were visible. Vanessa. Dr. Bennett wore a confused expression. The surrounding medical staff also seemed to sense the sudden change in atmosphere, each stopping their movements. This is your sister Jennifer. Silence fell. Vanessa stood dumbfounded, looking back and forth between me and Dr. Bennett. Her eyes held a mix of surprise, anger, and something else. Why are you here? Vanessa's voice trembled. Her makeup was smeared, and tears glistened in her eyes. As a doctor, it is my mission to save the life before me. Dr. Bennett's voice, though quiet, conveyed strong conviction. Though signs of fatigue remained, his gaze was resolute. The proposal party can be postponed. But the chance to save a life comes only once. That is my belief. With his white coat swishing, he headed off to his next patient. His back radiated the pride and determination of a doctor. Only his footsteps echoed in the hallway. I watched him go with tears still blurring my vision. My son's life was saved. That alone was enough for now. Everything else could wait. Right now, I only wanted to think about my son's recovery. Through the ICU window, I could see my sleeping son. Though his face was still pale, I could sense his steady breathing. The monitor's sound announced quiet hope. That sound seemed to herald the beginning of a new morning. After leaving the hospital, we drove in heavy silence. Only the doctor's words that my son was maintaining stable condition in the ICU supported my heart. Our car quietly drove through the twilight streets as streetlights began turning on one by one. We arrived at La Scale restaurant after 9 p.m. Warm light spilled from the windows of the upscale restaurant overlooking Greenwich Harbor. A crimson carpet stretched across the front entrance, with a champagne gold balloon arch installed at the entrance. Staff in tuxedos greeted guests at the door. Yacht masts rose in the moonlight from the pier. Mrs. Miller. The doorman wore a puzzled expression. He must have known about my lateness. Stepping into the venue, the atmosphere changed instantly. Crystal chandeliers cast an elegant glow, and the space was decorated in white and gold. Pure white tablecloths covered the tables, adorned with elegant floral centerpieces. Large mirrors hung on the walls, with a champagne tower arranged in front of them. Each glass beautifully reflected the light. However, the expressions of gathered family and friends contrasted sharply with this lavish atmosphere. Faint whispers drifted through the venue, and the glances directed at us were thick with reproach. Cousin Maria openly turned away, while my paternal aunt clicked her tongue softly. On the silver trays held by catering staff, hors d'oeuvres remained untouched. I could see the bubbles quietly disappearing in expensive champagne glasses. So you finally came. Mother's voice was cold as ice. Her pearl necklace cast an ominous gleam at her throat. Beside her stood Vanessa, still in her dress. Her makeup was smeared, and her eyes were swollen. Her white dress embellished with silver sequins was now wrinkled. Vanessa. The moment I tried to speak, my sister cried out. Her voice seemed to make the background music pause for an instant. Why did you choose surgery over the party? Why did you ruin my special day? At her voice, the venue fell silent. A waiter's tray trembled slightly. Because his life was in danger. That doesn't matter. Today was my special day. You ruined my once-in-a-lifetime proposal party. I spent months preparing. This dress was specially made to order. Vanessa's voice shook hysterically. The veins in her neck stood out. Everyone rearranged their schedules to be here. The venue was booked 6 months in advance. Vanessa, calm down. Mother placed her hand on Vanessa's shoulder. However, her eyes glared at me accusingly. Her pearl necklace swayed with her rapid breathing. Jennifer, you're always like this. Always thinking of yourself. It's your sister's most important day, and because you weren't here, the planned speeches and photos, everything was ruined. Each of Mother's words stabbed like a knife. The background music made her words even more piercing. Thinking of myself. My voice trembled. Anger and sadness welled up. My son's life was in danger. He just finished a 6-hour major surgery. You call that thinking of myself? Mother, he's your grandson. Relatives gathered around us like an audience at a theater. Under the luxurious chandeliers, an ugly family dispute was about to begin. Aunt Margaret, clutching an expensive clutch bag to her chest, spoke up. But, dear, the party was planned months ago. We specially made time to come from New York. That's right, Cousin Sophia chimed in. Everyone cleared their schedules to be here. All the surprises were prepared too. The relatives' voices of criticism piled up one after another. Hands holding champagne glasses trembled, ice cubes creating discordant sounds in the glasses. Just then, there was a sound at the venue entrance. As the heavy doors opened, everyone turned. There stood Dr. Bennett. Though he had changed from his surgical scrubs into a suit, his face still showed signs of fatigue. His tie was slightly crooked, different from his usual perfect appearance. It was clear evidence of the long hours of surgery. Michael. Vanessa started to rush over. Her high heels echoed on the marble floor. However, Dr. Bennett quietly raised his hand. The gesture carried a sense of determination. Vanessa, and everyone. Let me explain what happened today. His voice resonated throughout the venue. It was the voice of a professional doctor who had given serious explanations countless times. As a doctor, I chose to save the life before me. It was the life of a 15-year-old boy. He was in critical condition with internal injuries causing massive bleeding. When he was brought to the operating room, his blood pressure had dropped to dangerous levels. Dr. Bennett continued speaking, giving weight to each word. His voice mixed professional pride with personal conviction. The surgery lasted 6 hours. During that time, the boy's life was in danger multiple times. We fought desperately several times to prevent his heart from stopping. If we hadn't started the surgery immediately, he wouldn't be here now. A heavy silence fell over the venue. Only the sound of champagne bubbles could be faintly heard. And I have one more decision to make. Dr. Bennett's voice carried even stronger resolve. At that moment, the air in the venue seemed to freeze. I cannot marry someone who disregards human life. At those words, the venue erupted in murmurs. The sound of a glass being dropped could be heard, and someone let out a small cry. Michael! What are you saying? Vanessa's voice was almost a scream. Her hand reached out into the air. I cannot compromise my beliefs as a doctor. I cannot accept values that prioritize a party over human life. Not as a doctor, and not as a human being. Mother intervened. Her pearl necklace swayed violently. What are you saying? On such an important day, in such a lovely venue. Do you know how much this party cost? What matters is what happened on this important day. Dr. Bennett's voice maintained its calm while filled with strong determination. His eyes swept across the room. In the operating room, we were fighting for a boy's life. During that time, did the people preparing for the party understand the weight of life? While worrying about decorations, dresses, and food, a young boy was hovering between life and death. Complete silence enveloped the venue. The chandelier light illuminated everyone's equally pale faces. Dr. Bennett slowly turned to face Vanessa. I'm sorry. But this is my decision. As a doctor and as a human being, I will stand by my convictions. At that moment, Vanessa's engagement ring fell to the marble floor. The sound of metal hitting marble rang out with eerie clarity. It was like a bell tolling the end of everything. Various voices began rising from among the relatives. Voices of condemnation, sympathy, confusion. Amidst the swirling voices in the venue, Mother and Vanessa stood isolated. Their figures in expensive dresses now seemed somewhat pitiful. The aunts whispered things like, "How embarrassing," and "a family disgrace," while the paternal relatives had already begun leaving the venue. The wedding planner, who had been prepared for the wedding, stood dumbfounded. Cousin Maria approached me. "Jennifer, is your son really all right?" At those words, I felt that finally someone understood the essence of the situation. I quietly closed my eyes. My son's life was saved. That was all that mattered to me now. Tomorrow, I would be able to see my son's face at the hospital again. That thought alone supported me through this chaos. Outside the window, harbor waves quietly lapped against the shore. The chandelier light coldly illuminated the engagement ring on the floor. That light seemed to be watching over all of tonight's events. Spring sunlight streamed into the hospital room. 6 months had passed since that day, and cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom outside the window. The cherry tree-lined path on the Mercy General Hospital grounds gave a sense of new life stirring. "Mom, I'm being discharged today." Ethan smiled on the bed. Color had gradually returned to his once pale face, and strength had returned to his voice. Though surgical scars remained, his rehabilitation was progressing well, and the doctors were amazed at his recovery ability. "Yes. But you still need to be careful not to overdo it." "I know. But I want to get back to school soon." The soccer team members came to visit every week. At those words, I felt tears welling up. My son, who had overcome a life-threatening crisis, seemed a bit more mature than before. During his long hospital stay, he must have done a lot of thinking on his own. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night and talk about the meaning of life. A nurse brought the discharge paperwork. Meanwhile, I gazed out the window. Over these 6 months, many things had changed. Though some changes were painful, they were necessary steps in our growth. Mother began to change significantly after that night. At first, she couldn't acknowledge her mistakes, and we lost contact for a while. The incident at the luxury restaurant became talk of the local social circle, and Mother temporarily stopped appearing at parties. However, on a rainy day, she suddenly visited the hospital room. Without makeup, her usual dignified manner was gone. "Jennifer and Ethan." Mother's voice trembled. Rain dripped onto the floor from the umbrella in her hand. "I've started seeing a counselor. Dr. Sarah Thompson. I've realized the biases within myself." Since that day, Mother began regularly attending counseling twice a week. There, she started confronting her issues with values and excessive favoritism. She said she realized she had lost sight of her daughter's true happiness by obsessing over superficial success and appearances. "I've hurt you all this time. About Tom too, my attitude back then was wrong." Mother apologized while looking at a photo of my late husband. Though long-standing habits couldn't be changed easily, changes were becoming visible, slowly but surely. "I've started a support group for single mothers." Mother reported this the other day. Meetings are now held weekly at her mansion. She's begun using her social influence to help mothers in need. She's also started building a network of professionals including lawyers, doctors, and counselors. "I never truly understood the challenges of raising children alone." Mother's eyes held new determination. At Christmas, she hosted a party for single mothers from the support group and their children. Instead of competing over decorations and food, there was warm interaction. Vanessa's change was even more dramatic. After the broken engagement, she went through a period of deep depression. She disposed of her expensive dresses and accessories, deleted her social media accounts, and lived almost like a recluse. However, an encounter with a patient changed her. A young mother battling terminal cancer. Seeing this patient worry about the children she would leave behind deeply moved Vanessa. "As a nurse, did I really understand my patient's feelings? Wasn't I just providing superficial care?" Through such self-questioning, Vanessa decided to transfer to the hospice department. There, she gained deep insights from patients and their families facing life and death. Her flashy makeup became more subdued, and she spent more time with patients. Patients facing death teach us what's truly important. Vanessa said this while drinking coffee in the break room. Her eyes held a depth that wasn't there before. "I used to be too focused on superficial things. The scale of the wedding, the partner's income. But what's really important is having a heart that understands the weight of life." She seemed to be experiencing her own growth while empathizing with patients' families' emotions. She particularly focused on caring for young patients' families. "In the new ward, I met a wonderful doctor. He's a palliative care specialist." Vanessa told me this recently. Her expression then had a different, gentler radiance than before. This time, it was a meeting with someone who understood the weight of life. There was no trace of the previous superficiality. Sometimes we run into Dr. Bennett in the hospital hallways. We exchange polite greetings and interact as professionals. In that, I sense Vanessa's growth. Family gatherings have also gradually changed. The previous competition over appearances and superficial glamour has subsided, replaced by growing feelings of mutual consideration. Dinner at Mother's house has become a monthly tradition. Expensive tableware and decorations have become more modest, replaced by increased family conversation. Sometimes there are arguments, but that too is part of the process of understanding each other. "Jennifer, can we start over?" Mother's words contained years of regret and new hope. She now tries to show equal affection to both daughters. Sometimes old habits surface, but each time she checks herself and makes corrections. Having finished the discharge preparations, we stepped into the elevator. 6 months ago, I had pressed the floor button in this elevator with trembling hands. The fear and anxiety of that time were now becoming nostalgic memories. Mom, are Grandma and Aunt Vanessa waiting at home? I nodded at Ethan's question. I'd heard that Mother and my sister were preparing a small party at home to celebrate his discharge. We didn't need elaborate decorations or expensive food. Just family gathering together, rejoicing in each other's presence. That was enough. Yes, they're surely waiting. Today they're making meatloaf, your grandfather's favorite. Really? Grandpa's? Yes. Grandma has started cooking recently. She's begun working in the kitchen herself instead of leaving everything to the housekeeper. My son showed a slightly surprised expression at Mother's new side. Change had definitely taken root in our daily lives. Leaving the hospital, a gentle spring breeze embraced us. Learning the weight of life, reaffirming family bonds, and taking steps toward a new future. These 6 months had become an irreplaceable time of growth for all of us. As I got into the car, I looked up at the sky. Clouds announcing a new season drifted across the blue sky. The scene seemed to be blessing our family's new beginning.